So how did that lead into Disney then?
Well, it was funny because there was a movie being made called Heavy Metal. Remember that? Heavy Metal was like music videos.
Sells really well at the head shop too.
Oh, there's a movie, but by this time a few things had changed in my life, and I was pretty satisfied at Hanna-Barbera, and I'd gotten married by this time too, and I'm still married to the same person. Amazing. It'll be 36 years this December. But anyway, they said, and they're recruiting it, and they had a studio in Toronto doing some stuff, and around the world. They were doing a few sequences in Los Angeles. And a friend of mine, Mike Lessa, and he and I were really good friends at Hanna-Barbera. And we were also rivals to see who could create the largest quantity of work, because we would get a bonus for the number of drawings or the footage we would do. So everything was counted in film feed. So you had a quota that you had to finish each week, but if you went over the quota, then you got like an extra $15 for every foot you did or something. So it was an incentive program. So we were always in competition, to see how fast we could do it and make some extra money. But we were really good friends. And so Mike left Hanna-Barbera to go work on Heavy Metal. And after Heavy Metal, Mike called me and said, they're doing a movie at Disney. And he said, I don't know what it is. He said, it's some science fiction thing. He said, it's called Tron. And he said, they wanted me to work on it, but I can't work on it because I just signed a deal with, of course, we didn't know him. He says, do you want to work on it? And I said, well, to get into Disney, maybe. I said, so what's the deal? And he said, you got to talk to this guy, call this guy. And he said, it's 6 months work. And he said, they need some help doing effects, visual effects stuff. And that was all by hand and camera, and the way we did it back then was crazy. But so I went and I was an assistant animator on Tron, and then I became an animator on Tron, and I was an effects animator on Tron, and did a lot of work on that movie for about 9 or 10 months. And then Don Hahn, you may know his name if you know Disney, and he produced The Lion King, but he also did Maleficent last year. He produced that movie, and but he saw my work, and he said, because the Tron group were just a bunch of guys from the commercials world and different places around, art. They didn't call them boutiques then, but like boutique little studios and people who do advertising and stuff. And they came in to do this movie. It really wasn't. Disney was co-producing the film, but it really wasn't the Disney artists weren't working on it. It was a group of us, and we were all like motorcycle riding, and the Disney people at the time were pretty buttoned up, actually. It was sort of like an old Ivy League campus at the time. But so we would come in, on our bikes. They were like, I'll be glad when these guys leave. And we all had like long hair. And,
the punks at Disney.
We were like the punks at Disney. But so I came to Disney to work for 6 months, and I stayed for 22 years. So.
Wow, that's great. What are some of the other films you've worked on? And
when we talked about doing visual effects, I worked on Tron. I worked on Michael Jackson's Captain EO film, and then I did a few things. Later have like Disney Sunday night movies and stuff. They were produced for TV. So I'd sometimes do like, in this scene, a lightning bolt needs to strike the old town church. Can you do that for us? Okay. So I'd go off and figure that shot out or whatever and do that. So I did a lot of odd things, and I sort of became known as an artist who knew the camera department very well and knew how animation could be photographed in different ways. And I was pretty inventive at the time of doing things, and a lot of it I picked up during Tron from these guys who had come in from the commercial world and from ILM, because John Van Vliet had just finished doing visual effects on Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original, and he was my supervisor on Tron. And so I learned a lot from him. Mm-hmm. So I had sort of some skill sets that the Disney effects animators didn't have.
Nice.
And so I was learning from them, and then they could learn from me what I picked up too. So I sort of became like, sort of a guy that was a specialist or something.
Mm-hmm. But I IMDb'd you, and I saw some other pretty big titles in there too. Little Mermaid, I think.
The Little Mermaid. I didn't draw every bubble in The Little Mermaid, but I did draw probably about 30 million of them. So, bubbles, yeah, stuff like that, water effects and lightning. And an effects animator's job then, it still is really, but just dealing with anything that's not a character. Sometimes you may have a character like Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast, which I worked on, his flames on his body. So you do the flames on his body, or you do, if somebody's riding in a cart or something, you might do the cart, or you might do some, vehicle or, stuff like that. So it was fun. It was all fun stuff. And I also worked on The Black Cauldron, which was a terrible movie,
But the great book. I wish it was a good movie.
well,
Anyway.
they can't all be great.
But you moved from special effects animation, drawing bubbles, to now calling the shots. Now,
To Florida.
Yeah.
Moved to Florida. That was a big move because Disney wanted to open an animation studio here, and they wanted a few brave volunteers to sort of lead the way and come down here and establish a studio. And we had a great studio here for 15 years. It's a shame that it closed in 2004, but and there were 3 features produced here. Mulan was the first feature, and Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear. So those 3 features were done here in Florida. Almost, not completely. Mulan had a lot of LA connections, and of course Chris Sanders was our head of story on the film, and then he went on to direct Lilo and Stitch, which was his idea. He's at DreamWorks now. I think he just did. I think Home is his movie. That I don't know. I think it's come out. It just came out. Home.